as they will have been with the Prime Minister, because it's in their interest to not have less coal, but more. And so, on top of the $16.5 billion, this rather Labor government is going to expend billions more on infrastructure for coal exports from the Bowen Basin, the biggest coal province on the planet, in central Queensland, and from Newcastle, already the biggest coal exporting port on earth. It'll be overtaken by the new facilities in Mackay. On current projections, they're going to spend billions more facilitating railways and port handling facilities to accelerate the export of coal. Because when it goes out of the country, you don't measure the greenhouse gases. It's no longer your responsibility. And so we get to the situation where in a little country like East Timor, poorest in Southeast Asia, our neighbour, you remember we went to rescue it after 25 years of turning our back on the military occupation of that country, in which a quarter of the population died. But I'm told by our friends in East Timor they're currently importing 32 second-hand diesel generators from China. Chinese don't want them anymore. They're going to give new energy to East Timor. And so instead of getting the latest 24-hour-a-day sunshine producing solar technology, which is appropriate to a decentralised economy, as in East Timor, they're importing diesel plant from China, while we're busy exporting coal to China, which is also building fast, as you know, coal-fired power plants at the rate of one a week. We are on a planet in dire trouble. That little book, Earth, of Rode McManus going to Canberra, I asked a couple of other people, but anyway, Rode, of course I went on his program, and I'll tell you, after I did, that's a nerve-wracking experience. Go and sit in the audience, but be careful about crossing over to the microphone. Anyway, he was very pleasant, and he wrote me a handwritten note after the program. I've never received this before, but thanking me so much for coming on his program, etc. So I asked Rode, and he came up and he launched the book, and it was a very happy occasion. But it's a very serious topic, and I've tried to put together there in a 5-minute read, 500 words, where it is that we're at. But you can come down to this. We are, so far as we know, on the one tiny green planet in the whole universe which has life and awareness, and that's us. We are a big mammal. David Suzuki, my friend from Canada, reminded me best of this when he said, "Oh Bob, I was going to the supermarket in Vancouver, and when I got there was a sign in the window which said no animals allowed inside. So I got in my car and drove to a place where I could shop." We are a big mammal, totally dependent on this biosphere, which is a little disconnected because we're not we're not familiar with the extraordinary powers that we have. And Stephen Hawking, one of the great thinkers on the planet at the moment, postulates there may be other civilizations like us, hundreds of millions of light years out there in the universe. Why haven't they, and potentially, they've got to our stage thousands or millions of years ago, why haven't they contacted us? His theory is that every time we evolve to the point where we're able to manipulate the very thing we depend upon, that's the biosphere of the planet, which nurtures life, it gets wrecked. Now the challenge to us, with our eyes wide open, is can't we do better than that? And I'm agreeing, because I'm an optimist and I believe we can. And I say to young people very often, oh look, you're going to get depressed about what's going on the planet. You can't read about it without feeling this is very daunting. Humanity is making a muck of it. Well, get over it. You have a choice on this life of being optimistic or pessimistic. I spent 10 years in the second and didn't enjoy it very much. It wasn't very productive. And I know depression is a terrible thing for people to be, and I relate to that very much. But if you can, switch the button to optimism, because it feeds on itself, as does the alternative, and that gets us going. And we are on a planet which had 2.5 billion people on it when I was born into the world in 1944. There's a couple of my friends I was talking to here tonight who preceded me onto this planet. But most people haven't. 2.5 billion. It's now 6.8 billion and heading to 9.2 billion by this century before it curves and goes down. And we're already using 140% of the Earth's capital per annum. And we're in real straits. And what I believe is that we have to get out of it. If you rely on an informed populace and a democratic system, that will happen. But in the Senate, when Kerry Nettle and I were the only two Green senators, and our deputy sheriff, our Prime Minister, John Howard, was working with Mr. Bush, the President then of the United States, to extend democracy to Iraq. Remember we invaded Iraq to give them democracy? I thought that's fantastic. Let's extend it a bit further. And I put a motion up in the Senate which said that's our global democracy. One person, one vote, one value of Parliament, deal with just international issues, not our domestic ones. And the vote was 74 to 2 against. Everybody in the Senate voted against it except the two Greens. And as I was crossing the floor, somebody said to me, "Bob, don't you know how many Chinese there are?" Well, we've got to get over it. And if we do, we can make it. Because there is built in to humanity as a whole, where everybody is treated as equals, an innate common sense which is based on the wish that we should hand this earth to future generations, the better for us being here, not the worse. That is an absolute basic principle of democracy. But every time you try to change the world for the better, Machiavelli comes to play and you get clomped. Ask the suffragettes, ask the people who wanted to abolish slavery or get kids out of the mines and give them an education. There was a revolution in the waiting if ever there was one. Same arguments every time, they'll wreck the economy. How on earth could you run an economy if you had women having a say in it? They funded it in the House of Lords. And Norway, give it its due, legislated in 2005 to say that the boards of corporations must have 50% women. And the companies there threw their hands in the air and same story. How could you possibly do this? We're going to be, we'll fail compared to the rest of, well, they're doing great. They're doing fantastic. Thank you very much. Because the time has changed. When we thought one group of people, largely in suits, had the idea as to how this world should work. Let me give you an example of how global democracy might work. Ask the people of this planet in a vote tomorrow, do they believe $1 trillion US being spent on armaments in the coming year is a sensible thing, or if we should just reduce it by 6%, that'll give us $60 billion to ensure that every child on the planet had food in their belly, clean water, and a school for her or him to go to. You know what the vote will be, don't you? So common sense gets trammelled, not by democracy, but by the pressures that come onto democracy. The venal, big money pressures. And I'm not just talking about the Australian newspaper. I got one today. I found it in an airport lounge. And there it was having a go in some corner about the Greens. They hardly ever mention us, you know. But you would think that it was brought out by the sceptics on climate change themselves. A senior writer for The Economist was in Hobart last year. And he said, he rang me, and he's a war correspondent from Africa. He asked me to come and have a cup of coffee. He said, "Bob, this is Australian. I get European newspaper. I can't believe it." I pick it up in the morning and read about it, and I end up banging my head on the breakfast table. Well, there it is. Because there are moneyed interests behind it,